I personally think Canelo Alvarez is making a mistake by fighting Terence Crawford, because if you guys watch this channel, you guys already know what's good. I think Crawford's gonna beat Canelo, and it's no disrespect. I feel no bias towards either guy. I mean, I've never been the biggest Canelo fan. I've never been the biggest Crawford fan. But, taking that into account, I look at Crawford, I look at a guy that's not that much smaller than Canelo. I look at Canelo, I see him declining. I think he's not as fast. His gas tank hasn't been the best. Crawford hasn't had a great performance at 154. His first move up in weight since, clearing out every 147-pound contender and title holder by stoppage. So both guys are well decorated. There's no doubt about it. But I feel like if I'm comparing both guys at both points in their careers, neither's really in their prime anymore. But I think Canelo's more outside of his prime than Terence Crawford is. And I think that's the case, we're seeing time in and time out. It's not like I think Canelo is a horrible fighter or anything like that, because obviously he's not. But if we're looking and comparing Crawford where he's at in his career and Canelo where he's at in his career, I think Crawford's going to win. Because at this point in Canelo's career, yeah, he's younger than Crawford is, but he has more miles on him. He's fought so many times. He's had so much experience, both amateur and professionally. So I feel like we're starting to see that wear and tear take a toll on Canelo's body, and I think that's the reason why we're seeing him, get tired faster. His conditioning isn't great, which has always been an issue. He's always had issues with the gas tank, but I feel like against Terence Crawford, it's going to be a really big issue. And I just wish that he took the David Benavidez fight. I really do wish Canelo took that Benavidez fight, because if he had lost that fight, then it's fine. People, I think, real boxing fans would have respected that. But if he loses to Crawford, he's never going to hear the end of it. I'm really surprised Canelo took this fight. I think there's a good chance that he thinks that it's easy money to beat Crawford if you're Canelo Alvarez, and I just don't think or see that happening. I don't see Canelo stopping Crawford. Obviously that's a possible outcome, but if I were to personally put odds on it, I don't think that's a great bet. I don't think that Canelo is the favorite. I think real boxing fans really know that. Real boxing fans read in between the lines. You're gonna look past the weight classes. Obviously Terence Crawford's gonna have to be fast, but even if he was slow at 54, and I don't even think that's true. I think it's more so Madrimov's style that made Crawford look slow, but I think against Canelo he's gonna look way faster than Canelo is. And I think more importantly, Crawford's gonna have the better gas tank. And we know that boxing is a sport of conditioning, but of course there's that possibility that Canelo could, catch Crawford, but it's still an if. It's a huge if. You're gonna try to knock out probably the, #1 pound for pound best fighter in the world when you haven't had a knockout in a while. I just don't see it happening. And I'm not trying to disrespect Canelo, because I think he's a great fighter. I think, still that Benavidez fight should have been the fight that's taking place instead of this Crawford fight, because that's really a legacy fight. Obviously, Crawford as a name is a huge name no matter what, but for his division, at 168, if he fought Benavidez, he's fighting another Mexican, and then, ultimately it's not a big deal if he lost to Benavidez. Real boxing fans appreciate the risk that it takes to fight a guy like Benavidez. I even appreciate the risk that Canelo's taking to fight Crawford, but most people, the casuals, are going to see it as, oh, he's supposed to beat Crawford because he's coming up in weight. But for Canelo, I think the best decision would have been to fight Benavidez, because if he fights Benavidez, at least, there's that respect. If Canelo were to lose, he dared to be great. He took on the youngest lion, the hungriest lion, and the most dangerous lion. So it's that's credible, and you can respect that. But Crawford, it just seems like he's trying to pick on a younger guy, and I think it's gonna go, the smaller guy, not the younger guy. That's just what I see. I feel like Crawford is gonna be too fast, his conditioning is gonna be too good, and for Canelo, it looks like he's just picking on the smaller guy and bringing him up in weight. But in actuality, I don't think the fight is gonna play out the way Canelo thinks it's gonna play out. I think he believes that he could just land a big shot on Crawford and then hurt him and show him why there's weight classes for a reason. But also, on the flip side of that, Crawford's going to be ready. He's going to be, very fast on his feet. And I'm not saying he's going to run, but I think he's not going to be a stationary target. It's going to be hard for Canelo to land something clean on Crawford. And when he does, or if he does land on Crawford, I think Crawford's going to be able to take it. You know, I think his chin is overrated. Just because we've seen him hurt doesn't mean that, you know, Canelo's going to be able to land that shot, because Canelo's like, it's not like Canelo's unpredictable at this point in his career. You know he's going to look for a big shot. He doesn't throw combinations. You know, that's something that Terrence Crawford's aware of, and he knows that he's more skilled than Canelo Alvarez is. Otherwise, he wouldn't take this fight. You know, if people are saying that Terrence Crawford's taking this Canelo fight as a cash grab, I think they're, you know, strongly mistaken, because Crawford's just not cut from that cloth. But I think, you know, it's going to be an exciting fight. I just wish that Canelo had taken the Benavidez fight, because real boxing fans know that that's the fight that really would have tested Canelo's, you know, will and his legacy. But Crawford's still a huge name. It's just like lose-lose for him, because if he beats Crawford, people are going to be like, okay, you know, you were supposed to do that. If he loses to him, haha, you know, you lost to someone who came up in weight, multiple weight classes below you, and he beat you. So it's like, that's the reason I wish Canelo would have fought Benavidez, so, you know, the fans wouldn't have those arguments to say. But it is what it is. We'll see what happens. I still got to go with Crawford versus you know, Canelo. I got Crawford for sure, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next Nabs Boxing video. Peace.